Hello and welcome to another episode of the Around the 412 Fantasy Football Show. I am your host, Smitty. With me again this week, with me every week this season on the Around the 412 Fantasy Football Show, we got my guy Drew and my guy Joe. What is going on, fellas? How we doing?
What's up, man? Happy Tuesday.
Prime draft season.
It is a happy Tuesday. It is prime draft season. And with that, it's a happy Tuesday for a lot of people, right, Joe? But it's not a happy Tuesday for Jacksonville Jaguars fans, for Travis Etienne fantasy football owners. And I think that that's where we should start in tonight's episode with the news today. This kind of came, so quickly, right? And that's how these football injuries work. It goes from being a foot sprain, no one really knows the timetable of what this thing's going to be, to they put him on IR before they even put out their 53-man roster, so that ends his season. So let's just touch on this a little bit. I don't know where we want to go with it. I know Drew was hoping that the news of it being season ending wouldn't have come out yet before we did our episode so we could kind of touch on it. Because he did say, I will say, Drew sent me a text at like 10 a.m. this morning before this news came out and said that this is going to ruin his season even if he tries to play. So let's just touch on this a little bit, I guess, and see where we can go with it.
Yeah, so the Liz Frank injury, very serious. This has long-term implications. We need to discuss his value in Dynasty, but we're going to throw it out there right away. Do not draft him. It's on Twitter that people are taking late-round flyers. Absolutely do not draft him. He will not be playing this season. As Smitty said, he is on IR. I had a lot of stuff planned in terms of comps that maybe we can compare him to, but now that the injury is disclosed and he is done for the year, we can rule out a lot of these guys because most of them did come back. I would say the best comp that we're going to go with is probably Le'Veon Bell at this point. So Le'Veon actually hurt his Liz Frank area actually in the third preseason game, just like Etienne did. He was able to come back from it after missing 3 weeks, and he was able to have a good stretch, about 5 or 6 years of quality ball. The big concern here is, though, that they're much different players. What do you guys think?
Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, I think if you look at the nature of the injury for Etienne, it's just such a dynamic player, shifty on his feet, definitely quicker than Bell will be. So to have that happen, it's a lot of jumping, a lot of cutting. That's a huge impact on what he's going to be able to do. I have a lot of concerns about how this is going to impact him not only this year, but in the coming years. I mean, we've seen it a lot in football and even in basketball too, where you have these Liz Frank injuries and they linger and they have them multiple times. You see multiple surgeries. So I'm very bearish on the news. It's very unfortunate. I was excited to see him play. He was dynamic in college. Thought he was going to translate well into a pass happy scenario in the NFL. So to see him go down before even his first game, as a fan, it hurts for sure.
Yeah, I know we've kind of already touched on it, but when your game is predicated on what Travis Etienne's game is predicated on, it's going to make coming back from this injury and this year's been completely ruled out, but just long term, if you're in a dynasty league, we can talk about that as well. This is a situation now that you really have to monitor because we have no idea how Travis Etienne is going to recover from this injury and what he's going to look like long term. I mean, this is a huge question mark, and it's such a shame that he hasn't even played a game in the NFL, and now there's just this huge cloud overhanging what his NFL career could look like. And, from a fantasy standpoint, that's completely different. He does not care about his fantasy value to people, but
right.
That's what we're here to talk about is his fantasy value. And there's just this huge cloud now overhanging Travis Etienne dynasty owners. So it's a tough situation, but to kind of segue that into maybe something a little bit more positive, James Robinson now. I mean, you got to figure this guy's just going to start skyrocketing up. I mean, look what he did last year. People were questioning the Travis Etienne pick in itself on draft night. Now he's out of the picture as if that draft pick never happened. You got 1,000-yard back in James Robinson now. You would think that we're going to see that ADP just continue to skyrocket at this point.
Right. If you looked at his ADP before the injury, he was going in the 9th or 10th round in full PPR leagues. So from what I've seen in the last 24 hours, it looks like he's shaping up to be in that 4th to 5th round pick range. So an ADP of 40 or 50. He is going to be the unquestioned back for the Jaguars. A lot of questions about the offensive line and the offense as a whole. So I don't know where I feel comfortable ranking him at this point, but from a opportunity volumetric perspective, he definitely checks those boxes there and has a very solidified opportunity, maybe as good of an opportunity as someone like a Chris Carson or a David Montgomery, where you know they're not going to have contested carries. So being in that bell cow role, that obviously bodes well for fantasy, but I don't know how high up he's going to go. I'm a little more bearish on him than other people just because it took a lot of volume for him to get to that 1,000 yards. But opportunity is everything in fantasy football, and you have to start considering him with those earlier picks now.
It's going to take some time to really determine what he's going to be in fantasy, because I'm thinking that his value might be predicated on how well Trevor Lawrence does as well. If they let him throw the ball around the lot, and like you said, volume is a huge key with him, he might not end up being a value at the position he's going to end up going in long term.
Yeah, absolutely. And something I saw interesting, I was looking at this just before we got on the show, was that the distribution of carries for the Jaguars prior to the injury news. So if you looked at it, it was Robinson had 16, Carlos Hyde actually had 14, and then Etienne had 7. So Carlos Hyde is one of those people that really wasn't on anybody's fantasy radar. He could sneak into that pass catcher's role. I don't think that's necessarily a strength of James Robinson's, but that opportunity is going to linger, and I think he's going to shoot up the boards as well. I don't think he goes into that 8th or 9th territory that we saw Robinson at previously, but I do think you'll start seeing people drafting him when he wasn't being drafted before. So it'll be interesting to see how they carve that out.
Yeah, and you're going to see on this episode, we're going to be doing some mock drafts live here with you guys, showing you some different strategies. You're going to see the change in James Robinson if you've already done some mock drafts before compared to where you'll see him now. Also, if you're watching the show live right now or watching it back, you'll notice a very nice fricker ticker going on at the bottom of the screen right now that Joe has helped me put together. You're going to see the biggest risers, biggest fallers, and then injury news as we go throughout that as well. Joe, is there anything on there maybe as I bring that up that stands out to you, whether it be an early riser or faller? I mean, I want to let Drew bring up one because he called one of these risers one of the bigger increases. So let's start there, and then we can talk about maybe one or two other names that you're like either surprised by or have been validated based off what we said in the first week.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so Philip Lindsay, as he was gently mentioning, I called that last week. He's starting to get drafted in a lot of leagues, and David Johnson's starting to go undrafted. So a lot of people are picking up on what Philip Lindsay is potentially bringing to the table over in Houston, and hopefully it continues to actually work out. Who knows what's going to play out with that backfield as of right now, but a lot of people are starting to think that Philip Lindsay is going to be the guy.
Yeah, it was interesting to see. If you look at the live draft trends on ESPN for the last 7 days, Philip Lindsay has the greatest increase out of all players in the league right now. And David Johnson, I believe, is number 2 for players with the largest decrease. Yeah, so he's number 2. So to see just like the way that is changing, and how that's happening so rapidly. The player who's dropped the most is Myles Gaskin, which I still really don't understand. I know that there's been some concerns with camp, but I'm not really that confident in Malcolm Brown taking over as the number 1 guy. Gaskin had a really strong finish to the end of 2020, so it's really interesting to see him drop. A lot of the other names are from injury concerns or other things like that, which is to be expected. And I know with the Etienne news, he's definitely going to be on that list as well. But yeah, I think other players that you're seeing, a big one for me is that Waller is continuing to increase. Now he's already going as a 2nd round pick, but I think people are starting to see, all right, here's when I'm doing my drafts or my mock drafts, here's where Kelsey's going, and people are starting to get that itchy trigger finger. They're starting to reach maybe a little bit more for tight ends because there is that bit of a tight end wasteland as you're moving through the draft. So people are getting a little bit more itchy on wanting to secure that early and then not have to worry about that. We're not really seeing a lot of movement from quarterbacks, but otherwise, yeah, I mean, Drew totally nailed it with that pick. So it was fun to see that we actually know what we're talking about a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, as I was looking at it, the one for me, and you already mentioned the one that I was going to bring up if you didn't, was the Myles Gaskin one that I'm really having trouble understanding. Every other name on there I can kind of understand. And let me bring that one up actually to show you guys the biggest decreases if you are watching the show live or back. By the way, whether you're doing either one of those, please hit the subscribe button for us. Give us a like, leave us a comment what you want to see in the coming weeks as we progress here and get close to the regular season. But some other names on there, I know that it's not by much, but why is J.D. McKissic dropping? Is that just because Antonio Gibson they're expecting him to take on a bigger role now? Some of these are just interesting to me.
Right. And even more on the Gaskin news. So on Saturday, he has 6 rushes, 27 yards and a touchdown, has 4 targets, catches all 4, 44 yards, and he scored again. So it's interesting that he's continuing to free fall. He's someone to me that brings a lot of value, especially as we get into the show and we start talking about all right, what if we're going to punt on drafting running backs early? I think he's someone that you have to take a flyer on. And if you can get him when he initially was going as a 5th or 6th round pick, if you can now take that guy in the 8th round, there's a lot of value there. We know what Malcolm Brown can do. He's a bulldozer. He's a goal line, vulture type of player. We saw it happen with Akers and Henderson last year with the Rams. But he's not going to turn into this pass catching all down back all of a sudden. So I think it's a little bit overstated. I believe in the first preseason game they had, Malcolm Brown had 7 rushes for 8 yards. So it wasn't like he put up this dynamic performance. But yeah, it'll be something that's interesting to monitor. And as far as McKissic, I think there was some concerns. If you recall last year, he pretty much dominated all of the third down work. Gibson wasn't really getting anything at all. There was some anticipation that Gibson would get more of the third down work, but I haven't seen it so far in the preseason. I think that McKissic really has carved out that role. I would anticipate that the majority of that drop, 3 picks isn't all that great if you're looking compared to the 24 or the 19 picks. But I would anticipate that's probably just weighted from a standard league perspective. He doesn't really hold a lot of value. He's primarily going to be a PPR, James White sort of player that he'll get you some catches. He might have a nice flash in the pan, or it would be a great candidate for best ball. So I wouldn't put too much stock into that move.
Yeah, and he's also game script dependent, I feel like. If they're down, which they have a great defense, it might not happen very often. He might not be worth a start unless they're down, or because he's playing third down role primarily. Mm-hmm. So it's tough to say how he's going to be.
I know we're anxious to get into these drafts, but the last thing that I want to bring up before we do that is just talk to you guys about some of the other notable injuries. We already touched on Travis Etienne enough, but Darrell Henderson, a little bit of a thumb issue that doesn't look like it's going to be too much, right? A.J. Brown, who we expect to be ready to go. Carson Wentz, though, is the one for me that when it happened, we're talking about this guy missing multiple weeks. Now it looks like he's to be ready week 1, along with Quentin Nelson, who was obviously from a real-life standpoint very important, but fantasy standpoint, that only really impacts other players. What do you make of Carson Wentz's situation? Does that, who even besides Jonathan Taylor from that Colts offense are you drafting?
Michael Pittman's a late round flyer guy. I hope you hit as a home run. Yeah. But like you said, Jonathan Taylor's the main guy you're going to be watching here. Prior to his injury, he was going as the 8th best player, and he's still down below Aaron Jones and Austin Eckler right now. So it's interesting to see. It's only been a day that news really came out. His ADP might shoot back up near the weekend when most drafts are happening.
Yeah, I think it'll definitely trickle up a little bit. I think there's some concern on whether it's coach speak and they're actually going to be available for week 1, or if it's just we don't want the other team to find out. But I agree. I think that slide, if they see some action or if they continue to practice without issue, he'll probably climb in the rankings a little bit.
I don't know about Quentin Nelson, but there's some good video of Wentz from today's practice. He looks okay. Yeah.
But to answer your question, Smitty, I don't think that there really is a lot of draftable players. Like Drew said, you have some dart throws. I don't think T.Y. Hilton is really a fantasy relevant receiver at this point in his career. He had some flashes last year, but not seeing it. But it's really late round dart throws. If you want to throw a chip into the Mo Alley Cox tight end story, you could do something like that. Blankenship, obviously, from a kicking perspective, maybe. But, not really impacted by the injuries whatsoever.
Right. Okay. And then as far as these drafts go, like I said, we want to do some live drafts with you guys using some different strategies that we ourselves on draft day might not necessarily implement, but we're going to show them to you anyways. Where do you guys want to start with this? I know that we want to do one where we take in, Travis Kelce with our first pick and see where it goes from there, see how good of a team that we can get. Should we just start there? Or what are you guys thinking?
Yeah, let's do it. And I think something to keep in mind, and it's an interesting exercise to draft in ways that you wouldn't typically draft on draft day. It really takes away like the heart out of it for you, and it's just like, all right, I'm drafting based off of certain parameters. So for me, it's allowed me to see like, all right, here are rounds that I feel are really good for receivers. Here's rounds that I feel are really good about running backs. And just like we said last week, we're basing this off of a 10-team full PPR league. Keeps a little bit of the housekeeping stuff more simple. And then if we have any rules that going into the draft, then we'll outline those from the start, and we'll talk through picks. If you have feedback in the comments, let us know. If you love the pick, hate the pick, think we should pick someone else, we're definitely open to it.
Well, what if I hate the pick?
Well, you're the one You're the one driving, so I mean, ultimately, our votes don't really matter. But
okay, so should we stick with pick number 6? Like you said, this is out of 10. I know that we had been kind of sticking in this 6 range, but if we're going to go tight end first, I don't know if that means we should move back or just stay consistent with this.
Well, let's do it this way. What do you think is the earliest pick that you would feel comfortable taking Kelsey?
Me personally, I mean, I guess 10 and 11 are one and the same if it's a 10-team league, because either it doesn't really matter if I'm taking the first or second pick of my back-to-back. But I'd say with that, like if I had the last pick of first round, I might do it.
Okay.
I mean, I try to get a running back in every draft. I try to get a running back early, and if they all go, then I'm probably picking Javonte Adams. I'm not going to have many leagues with Travis Kelce in my lineup, I'll be honest with you. So it's up to you guys.
Yeah. It is interesting because you are really drafting him at his ceiling. If you think about like a value perspective, he's actually ranked as the second most valuable player in fantasy football relative to his position and like what it would take from a replacement value. I think the earliest that I could find myself actually taking him, though, in a full PPR league, I don't think I could take him over McCaffrey, Cook, Kamara, Henry, Elliott. After that, after those 5, I think that I could pull the trigger. So 6 would be the earliest for me. But I also...
Well, I think to stay consistent, we should probably just stay at 6. I mean, I know that we're going to be reaching on him maybe a little bit, but we've seen him go in that spot.
Right, yeah. And that would be the other thing. It would make it super awkward if we go to the last
if he wasn't there.
Already drafted. Yeah.
All right. Chubb goes at 5. Okay.
And just to give you a little context, so this is the Fantasy Pros mock draft simulator. It's something that I use all the time. If you don't have an account, you don't need to run the draft, but it gives you a lot of information about like how your team would score out for the season based on projections. It allows you to have like the draft picks based off of like different criteria. So ESPN, Yahoo, whatever. You can set it for different settings, league sizes. You can actually import one of the teams that you have from those leagues and get feedback on like waiver wire moves and stuff like that. So it's a pretty useful tool. But it's nice if you want to crank out a lot of drafts very quickly. Don't want to wait for like the ESPN 10 round, like every 15 minutes, like sign up for a spot. This is a pretty good way to like do your research and see where things are falling. So, yeah.
And while we're giving shout outs, as you just did for Fantasy Pros, and rightfully so, we've been using their site a lot. We're going to be using it a lot throughout the show. Got to give a shout out to DC4L Customs as well for our new logo, as you can see both in the circle above us right now and also in the corner of the screen. That's his work. I mean, literally, you tell him what you want, bam, you have it in like 15 minutes.
It's unbelievable.
So, yeah.
He's so talented, too. Great work.
Shout out to him. But okay, back to business here. We do take Travis Kelce 6th overall. Comes back to us. I don't think it's in a terrible spot. I mean, DeAndre Hopkins is still there. Calvin Ridley's there still, obviously. If we want to go running back, Antonio Gibson, who we touched on with the McKissick situation, still kind of taking away that third down work. We think there's people that don't believe that's going to be the case in year 2 for Antonio Gibson. Joe Mixon, which actually, while we're on Joe Mixon, Drew, you brought up a good point potentially with his injury going back to last year. Are we going to even see a fully healthy Joe Mixon this year?
They're saying that he's good to go, but he's been the most mysterious player since that injury happened. They haven't told us a thing. And the injury kind of sounds like a potential Liz Frank injury, especially with the timeline. So if we believe that could harness his future, he might have some question marks there. And I mean, with that O-line is awful too. So his rating is a little too steep for me, but there's a lot of question marks there.
I might sound like a homer here. if we're taking a running back, I'd be taking Najee Harris before the two that are in front of him. But I'm also not opposed to going DeAndre Hopkins or Calvin Ridley.
Right. So from a value perspective, top ranks guy would be Hopkins, then Ridley, then it would be Mixon, Harris would be like your top four. Gibson's actually ranked below Harris from a value perspective on the season. To me, in this spot, I feel like you're probably not going to get Najee or Gibson on the way back. So if that's a player that you feel that strongly about, then you can draft them. To me personally, it's a reach, and I would probably wait. I do think that there's a lot of value at the 4-5 turn for receivers this year. And then for like running backs, so like that 6th to 8th round spot has a lot as well. So it ultimately just depends on like the makeup of your team. And do you want to take a quarterback early? Do you want to like shore up on receivers? Like where do you feel comfortable and like most knowledgeable about players?
Yeah, I guess the thing for me, the way I'm looking at it is, and it's a guessing game because we don't know the picks that are going to come after this, but I'm thinking, would I rather have Najee and one of the receivers that are likely to be there, or DeAndre Hopkins, and if there's a run on running backs right after our pick, who knows who's going to be the best running back available?
Yeah, so realistically, if you take Najee here, you're going to end up with somebody in the 3rd round, like a Keenan Allen, Allen Robinson, maybe Terry McLaurin falls, definitely like a Robert Woods. Whereas from a running back perspective, would you rather have like a CEH, Swift, Carson to pair with that bona fide wide receiver one?
I mean, Drew, where are you on this? Because I think that you are probably with me.
Yeah.
Najee's the pick.
I've always been the type to get my running backs early because the wide receiver position is by far the deepest position in fantasy football. You're finding guys that are startable in rounds 6 and 7. Even they're not bona fide studs, but they're serviceable guys with decent floors.
Yeah, I'm just really worried about what the running back should look like. And this isn't our actual team. I'm pretending like I got money on the line here, but
yeah. But I will say I think that is the downfall of drafting a tight end in round 1.
Yeah. Right? I
Right?
mean, you're going to see how this plays out. Yeah,
you're definitely getting the value. You don't have to worry about it. You don't even need to draft another tight end, but now it's like you're going to have holes in these other places. And it's like, is it worth it to you to not have to have that? Or is it, all right, I'd rather shore up on my running backs or my wide receivers or a little bit more of both. So it's like if you're going to spend more on the premium for a quarterback or a tight end, then that's definitely going to impact you for the rest of the draft.
I want to make this – go ahead.
There's schools of thought there. So if you end up with Kelsey, you have I think they said like 10 to 15 point advantage over the next tight end most weeks. In terms of your average score. Yeah. And if you don't end up with Kelsey, you're just sitting there at an even playing field going later on and still having a better stud at wide receiver and running back. So, I mean,
Joe, let me ask you this because I don't know where you stand on this. Would you take Joe Mixon or Najee? Between the two, where are you at?
Oh, I would take Najee for sure. I think that Mixon like has the potential, but I don't think Burrow is healthy. I haven't seen enough from like the receivers, so it's like it seems very similar to last year with a more hurt quarterback. They would have drafted Sewell in the 1st round, and Burrow wasn't massacred last year. Then I'd probably feel differently. I have a lot of faith in Mixon as a player, but I think the volume that Najee's going to receive, it's not going to be realized, but you can see it. I mean, just because he's a rookie, I think people are a little bit down on him. But we've seen rookie running backs do really well in the past, so it can definitely be done.
I tend to draft risk averse. I don't want to take guys that have question marks, and I don't know what Joe Mixon is, and they don't say anything about his health. They just say foot injury. What foot injury? Great.
Yeah, so we're between these two players. I want to make this pick and keep this rolling, but I would also lean going running back here.
All right, democracy rules, so y'all get after it.
Okay. And let's just hope that Mahomes, Hopkins, Metcalf, Ridley, Jefferson. Okay. Keenan Allen. These are the names that you said were going to be here. So
Hold on.
Keenan Allen, Allen Robinson.
Before.
Terry McLaurin, CeeDee Lamb. I mean, it's Keenan Allen for me. I've taken him in a lot of mocks.
Yeah,
I
would
really
agree.
think second year Justin Herbert. Keenan Allen was already a pretty safe player, regardless of who was playing quarterback. Now he's got second year Justin Herbert throwing him the ball.
The best
Yeah,
part.
they vacated targets with Henry. They didn't really add anybody. So, I mean, I think it's a good spot. Keenan Allen had a lot of games where he was like kind of hurt. He gets that Julio vibe sometimes where it's like you see him in the news all week, but then he plays, puts a hoodie on and throws has like 10 catches for 100 yards, like no big deal.
Mm-hmm.
But his volume is unbelievable. I mean, you can't really go wrong with either of those top two picks. I mean, those guys are like 150, 160 targets a year kind of players. So between Allen Robinson and Keenan Allen, that's more of a toss-up to me. Keenan Allen has done so well for me in the past that it's hard to not take him, though.
I think the best thing about picking Keenan Allen here, too, is we're going to start to show people how bad bye week 7 is going to be for everyone this year.
Yeah, because let's look how this played out. Now, I'm not saying that this would have been the pick, but look at the next two top receivers have the same bye as Keenan Allen. And I know that, Drew, very high on CD Lamb. But let's look at what's still there. Running back, Chris Carson, David Montgomery, James Robinson.
Bye week 7.
Reach here, but bye week 7 as well.
I fully expect to lose in week 7. In our sleeper, Smitty's just going to smash me. I have like 5 guys on bye week.
All right, so this is so we got one running back, we got one wide receiver, we got one tight end. This could be really anything. I know with the running back position, it's more of slim pickings, if you will. So you'd rather get your guys early in that spot.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the value that you're going to get on the way back from the receivers in 5 and 6, it's like I would rather take like a Chris Carson here. I think that you're going to get the same level of player from the receiver. There's not a big drop off in the receivers, whereas after Chris Carson, David Montgomery, now maybe James Robinson, depending on how things shake out, like that's the last of like a pretty big tier of players. So to me, it's like I would want to lock up on one of those two guys. I know when we've talked, you guys are pretty high on David Montgomery. I'm not as convinced. So I would probably take Carson here.
I like either one. I mean, flip a coin, but especially with what we're hearing with Pete Carroll being committed to running the ball, I'm fine with Chris Carson here.
I'm fine with any of the three, honestly. So if you think running back's going to be slim pickings in the next round, I'd probably pick one of those three. I think the second half of last season, the Seahawks really struggled throwing the ball. There was a huge drop-off in their fantasy production. So I don't think that it's noise in terms of Chris Carson. I do think that they're going to come back and run the ball a ton. I do like him here.
All right. Well, that's what we're going to do then. All right. Let's see what they're thinking for us here. DJ Moore, T. Higgins, Kyler Murray, still James Robinson there.
Yeah. I think on the quarterback front, so this is where it starts to get interesting too. I mean, I know we already have picked early on the tight end, so taking Kelsey. I think that there's a very distinct grouping of there's the top 4 QBs where you have Mahomes, Allen, Murray, Jackson. This is probably starting to be that range if you want one of those top 4 guys that you're needing to make that pick, because they have the rushing upside and like the supreme offense. I mean, Dak could maybe get put into that group, but with his injuries and stuff, he's sliding down the boards a little bit. But to me, this is like if you feel strongly about a quarterback pick, this is where you were going to make it. I wouldn't make that pick here. I would probably be going like a T. Higgins or I don't know, maybe even like a Darrell Henderson or something there. But I was actually hoping that Deontay Johnson would fall into a spot like this. But he's climbing up the boards after he keeps getting peppered with targets in the preseason. So.
He went this round. I mean, right before Chris Godwin and Adam Thielen, which, I mean, you look at the targets last year, I would say rightfully so, but it's still just crazy to see him leapfrog names like that.
Right. Yeah, and I definitely wouldn't I would expect Godwin, Evans more to be above him, so it's surprising to see him get drafted like that, but it is reflective of what's happening right now.
This stuff can change too, but more best strength of schedule.
Robbie Anderson got paid today.
Yeah,
he did.
So
and Moore needs a new contract too. So okay, you mentioned T. Higgins. I like that pick. I mean, especially with everything that we're hearing about Jamar Chase. I mean, the whole scenario there with him, not just on the field, but whatever's going on off it right now. Don't want to really speak on it until we have more information.
Yeah.
But just has not been a good start to his Bengals tenure. So, I mean, I like T. Higgins here as well. I would probably slightly lean him over DJ Moore, who they have in front of him. They consider that a reach based off ADP, but
yeah, I think if it was me, I would probably take Moore just because of the target share and his air yards. He's been a darling for those kind of metrics. I think that like he's one of those like boomer bust kind of guys. But I think that T. Higgins will be there on the way back. So it's like I'd rather lock up Moore.
That's
and then
true.
see if T. Higgins is going to be there on the way back. If not, then you have plenty of options that you can take from a flex from like a running back standpoint. So that's when you're getting into your Darrell Henderson's. Josh Jacobs should still be there. Maybe even like a Mike Davis, perhaps.
I mean, if DJ Moore could just find the end zone with some regularity. What do you have, 4 touchdowns last year?
Yeah.
Like if he can get into that like 8, if he can get like 8, he'd be a stud.
Yeah.
All right, so you think DJ Moore's the pick? I haven't taken him in a mock draft, to be honest with you.
I think so.
All right. Ayuk, Chase, Higgins does go. 2 more quarterbacks went there.
Yeah,
so you
so
were
that's
kind of
like
right
that last
that range.
tier, right?
I'll start off by saying I kind of like James Robinson here.
Yeah.
it's good value for sure.
With all the information, we can only go based off the information we have as we sit here today. Assuming Jacksonville doesn't add another running back, and I know that a lot of what he did last year was volume-based, but you would figure with Travis Etienne out of the picture, it's going to be the same thing again. Like, I feel like this is a very comfortable spot for James Robinson. I expect him to actually go higher than this.
Right.
But I don't know. I like this here, if you guys are okay with that.
No, I'm good with that. And the reason that I'm good with it is if you look at like the remaining running backs that we have, we're starting to get into either like more role players like a Kareem Hunt. You have players that are falling like Gaskin, or you have guys that are very much in like a timeshare. Josh Jacobs is falling a lot lately in drafts, which is pretty weird to see. But if you look from like a receiver perspective, you still have a lot of big names out there. You have Kenny Galladay's lasting pretty far. Robbie Anderson's lasting. Juju, Brandon Cooks. So you're seeing a lot more availability there in those like mid to late rounds from a wide receiver perspective, whereas the running backs, it dries up so fast.
Okay, so
This is around the time where I might start looking at the quarterbacks. I'm not sure I'm in on Rodgers because I prefer to have a guy that has some rushing ability, but it looks like we missed it. So I think we did one recently where we waited around this spot and Tannehill made it back a couple times.
Yeah, we would have made one more pick. Yeah.
To me, it's like having Josh Jacobs as like my first guy off the bench is pretty insane to me. I could also be swayed with like the Robbie Anderson or something like that, but then you have both of the Carolina wide receivers, which I'm not interested in. I think Tyler Boyd's still going to be solid out of the slot for the Bengals. But I think from a value perspective, I mean, Josh Jacobs, still the starting running back. He's very game script dependent. So if the Raiders are winning games, and he's going to get the ball a ton. And now you pretty much have 4 running backs lined up. You probably won't need any more than that unless there's some like either say like what's the word, like a handcuff, or if there's like a late round flyer that you're crazy about. But
I was really hoping that that Tyler Boyd wouldn't get taken there, or even, I mean, I don't know. I guess I could have maybe like look at what these last few picks were. Like these were literally all the guys that I was thinking. Tyler Boyd just a couple picks before us.
Yeah.
Two more quarterbacks off the board right after we took Josh Jacobs. which is fine because you said a guy with maybe a little bit of a rushing ability. Ryan Tannehill has been a guy that we've heavily targeted with the strategies that we've gone with.
Right.
He just seems like the perfect, I'm not going to take my quarterback till the 9th round type of quarterback who has finished as a top 10 guy the last couple years.
Right.
And he gets a lot of sneaky rushing touchdowns with play fakes to Derrick Henry rollouts, and no one's over there every time. Everybody's expecting Henry. So I think he's had like 6 or 7 rushing touchdowns last year and the year before.
Yeah. Okay, so we take a look here. I mean, is this where we take Ryan? Well, we still don't have 3 receivers yet either.
Yeah, I mean, I think you still want to go receivers. I would think Brandon Cooks. We already know who I feel if he's still available, and Jerry Jeudy. I wouldn't mind taking a crack at him since he would be coming off.
I think he went pretty early in this one. Yeah.
Did he? Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
right
Yeah,
before
he's
we
been
took
going on
Jacobs.
7. Okay.
Yeah.
So to me, Cooks would probably be my pick. I think Cortland Sutton has similar upside to Jeudy, but I would rather throw my dart at the Brandon Cooks pick. I think he's very undervalued here. So that's probably where I would lean, and then see how the quarterback situation shakes out. Because at this point, the difference between like a quarterback 6 and a quarterback 10 is about 1 point per game, and there's plenty of options that are going to be here. So.
Yeah, we didn't see a quarterback come off the board there. So, I mean, we still have Tannehill, Hurts. Matthew Stafford's an option for me too. I mean, in that offense, again, you're talking about a guy now at that point that doesn't offer that rushing upside that you were talking about, where that's pretty much what Jalen Hurts is. That's why he's even being mentioned here, is because in games that he played last year, he averaged, 50-plus yards a game? So he's adding 5 points just with his legs.
Right,
I mean,
exactly. And I think that's like one of the things where it's like, if you are just looking to have a serviceable quarterback who's going to finish in that 6 to 10 range, Tannehill's going to be great. Stafford's going to be great. Brady's going to be great. If you're trying to find who is the person that's going to break out this year and take that next step, then you can pair them with the Jalen Hurts. You can pair them with one of the rookies that's coming off. You could say, all right, we're going to go with one of these guys that has a pretty safe floor, like a Tannehill or a Stafford, and say, all right, you know what? Now I'm going to stash as like a late round flyer on a Trevor Lawrence, on like a Tua, on a Trey Lance, and say, all right, when they come in, if it can happen, oh, there we go.
Did you even realize this was a Tua shirt?
I had no idea. I thought you were just ready for. I thought you were just excited about pumpkin season.
It's the first thing you said to me when we got on here.
A little early for me.
Yeah, it's too hot for that. It's still over 100 degrees in Texas. We can't be doing no pumpkin stuff. But we do have Yingling here now, which is fantastic. So
there you go. All right, so with this, you've mentioned Corey Davis too, and I guess technically when you look at quarterbacks, we're probably the last team that hasn't taken one yet. We could continue to wait, and take somebody else, go with another receiver. What would you guys do in this spot?
I feel comfortable taking Tannehill here. I think that Corey Davis has shown good rapport in the preseason with Zach Wilson, but to me, that's not like a league winner move. I would rather lock in a quarterback that I know that is going to be solid. We don't know truthfully how Stafford's going to do in LA. He could struggle immensely. He could do what he was doing before. Tannehill has all things trending upward with him, where he's been a fantasy relevant quarterback with a run first team and is also getting Julio Jones. So to me, it's like, if I miss out on Corey Davis for that safety, I'm not going to feel too heartbroken about it.
I'm on the fence either way. If you want to go Tannehill, I support that to lock in your guy, but I also feel comfortable that I would be okay if we had Tannehill or Jalen Hurts and a Matthew Stafford and grab Corey Davis, because we only have 3 receivers. But the safer move is probably to just take Tannehill and get it out of the way.
Yeah, I'm Team Tannehill here. I've gone back and forth with it. Corey Davis does go.
TJ Hawkinson in round 9 is kind of surprising to me. Did you see that? That was a late run on tight ends. Late run.
Yeah, that's very surprising, and it's not consistent with the ADPs that I've been seeing for him. So I'm curious where that's happening at. At least from an ESPN perspective, he's been averaging pretty much right around pick 60. So to see him go in the 9th round, that's really bizarre to me, because there's no news that he's had any issues. I mean, the latest thing that they had out of Detroit was he's pretty much the safety valve for Goff. So whenever Goff struggles in practice, he just starts throwing to Hawkinson. So that's bizarre to me. He's being drafted as tight end 6 right now, so Pitts is slotted ahead of him now. But yeah, I wouldn't expect him to last that far in a real draft. If he does, I mean, I would be ecstatic to see someone that I'm targeting.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, with this pick, since we went quarterback last time and didn't go receiver, I would say that's probably where we want to go, but look at that bye week 7, man.
It's everywhere.
7:30.
Even other people that you would take, like, it's just all there. So we were talking about this a little bit before the show. How do y'all approach like your bench? So do you just fill it up with the best guys available? Do you say like, all right, like I'm only going to designate like I have a backup running back, I have a backup receiver now I'm going to go for guys that might hit it big this year? Like, what's your mentality when you're building out your roster construction to maximize your potential? Because bench points, unless you're playing best ball, it doesn't matter if your bench has the most points in the league.
Yeah, so like you said, I generally will get my starters and then maybe have 1 or 2 guys that I feel I can put in place if there's an injury or a bye week situation. And then I just try to start hitting homers. So I go for guys that I think can absolutely explode and hope that you hit on one of them, because that's how you win leagues, by getting some of these guys that aren't necessarily sure things that just come out of nowhere and become top 10 to 20 players at their position.
Yeah, I would say I more so just take the best player available, but even to expand on that, pretty much just like running backs and receivers. Like so say it's 6 bench, which this is the case here. Like I'm definitely, before taking a second tight end, before taking a second quarterback, 4 of my bench spots are going to be taken by 2 running backs and 2 receivers. In most cases.
I support this. All right, so let's get this draft on because we've got a bunch more that we want to do.
Yeah, I feel like, by the way, going forward for these last couple of drafts, I don't think that we're going to be talking as much about each pick or in between them, because we could see us take like the same players. So we won't have to expand on the reasoning behind those as much. But okay. So again, we only have 3 receivers right now on the roster. We have 4 running backs. We obviously only have the 1 quarterback. We have the 1 tight end. Still 4 bench spots to take care of here, so could go pretty much any direction.
Yeah, so I think if we're talking about like more like lottery pick type receivers, Gallup is supposed to be taking that slot receiver role for Dallas, which is going to give him some more target share. He's done pretty well. Mike Williams, bona fide number 2 receiver, but we don't really see the targets with him. But without Hunter Henry, does he get more of a target share now? Who's to say? I think someone that's like a true lottery pick, and I think everybody's talking about him this year, is Darnell Mooney. Marvin Jones, I think, has a lot of upside with his rapport with Lawrence. But again, I don't really care about bye weeks when I draft, but that week 7 bye week is just staring me in the face right now. So to me, I would be going receiver here, but whoever you pick at this point, it's going to be more or less the same for me. So
I'm not big on Mike Williams, and I'm kind of out on Devontae Parker until we see Tua take that next step. And even if that's the case, even if we see that happen, I'm not so sure that Devontae Parker is like the big beneficiary there.
Yeah.
If Tua does take that next step. Between the other 3, I would probably, I mean, you guys know how high I am on Darnell Mooney. With that being said, I really do like Gallup. I would probably say Gallup, Mooney, Marvin Jones Jr. would be how I would pick those 3. So
Devontae Parker's dealing with an injury too that might hold him out a little bit. So I think he's more likely to be an undrafted player in most redraft leagues. I mean, I generally look at homers in this spot, but I'm not comfortable with the depth that we have at this position. So I think I'd rather lean on a guy that has a safer floor, and I'd probably go with Marvin Jones.
Sense. Yeah. And I can, that reasoning definitely makes sense. I can get behind that reasoning. So we've all mentioned Marvin Jones Jr., so that might as well be the pick.
All right, let's do it.
We know that the ADP might be a little bit of a reach based off that week 7 bye. Throw it in the toilet. We don't care. No Travis Etienne. That means 5 more targets a game for Marvin Jones Jr. No, I don't know. Okay, so Darnell Mooney still is there if we want receiver.
While we're looking at this, there's some rumors that DeAndre Swift might not be available to start the season. I don't know if you guys have seen that.
Oh.
Yeah, I
It's
did.
okay.
Because they were worried about his conditioning, but then he seemed to be all right. But Jamal Williams would be that back. I think this is the point in the drafts, too, where you need to start considering handcuffs. So if you did take an early running back in that first round, then you want to take players that are going to fall into that. So players like
which, by the way, isn't Benny Snell for Najee Harris.
Correct. That's definitely not. But players like like Tony Pollard, for example, Latavius Murray. This isn't that comfort zone when you want to start drafting them, especially if you're drafting those players. Strategically, you could draft those players, not have the person in front of them. The handcuff is always a way that you can go about it. We don't really have that in this scenario with Kelsey, so it's not really something we have to worry about, but you could if you wanted to.
There's a potential starting running back still on the board here, too.
James Conner, who is expected to take over that Kenyon Drake role in Arizona. I mean, obviously Chase Edmonds is still there, but he had been just primarily a pass-catching guy. Is he really a between-the-tackles runner? Bringing in James Conner and giving him like a 1A, 1B type situation with Edmonds, you would think that, if they can keep him fresh, it's not like James Conner was a bad player in Pittsburgh. Just couldn't stay on the field. If they can keep him fresh and limit his touches and get the most out of him, I do like the situation there. That's probably the one running back, if we're going running back, that I would be looking at here. I'm not really interested in the other options that sit here.
Let's do it.
Okay. So we got Najee Harris and James Conner.
There goes Darnell Mooney.
Son of a...
Tragic.
Will you Murray me? How dare they? All right, so we've taken now that those 4, and like I said, 2 wide receivers, 2 running backs is what we got so far. Now, I want to ask you guys this. Are you always married to the idea of drafting a backup quarterback and a backup tight end, or is that sometimes not even on your roster?
I hardly ever draft a backup quarterback just because they're so replaceable that it's like, all right, like a guy off the waivers, like I'm uncomfortably active on waiver wire. So it's like if somebody pops off, I'll be ready for it. I would rather have more running backs and wide receivers, or if I don't have Kelsey, maybe a second tight end just to see what happens. I think in this scenario, what we had talked about was like getting somebody that has like that upside. So I wouldn't be upset with taking Hurts here. Or if you want to take one of the rookie guys that you think could jump off the screen, or a younger guy that you think can take that next step. But that's not.
Well, no, I was going to mention Hurts just because ever since we took Tannehill, no other quarterback has been taken. Right. So, if we feel like Tannehill provides that floor, the boom bust potential of Hurts is still sitting on the board for us to take, which could potentially end up being QB1 over Tannehill, depending on what that ceiling is.
Right. I mean, I'm comfortable with that pick. It makes me think, like, should I just wait to take Hurts anyway?
Yeah, who knows what would have happened if we didn't take Tannehill with that when we did and just would have continued to round it out with running backs and receivers. I don't know when Tannehill would have went. I assume that he would have gone at some point, but we still could have had Jalen Hurts right here and then just taken like Stafford or some Matt Ryan or something as a safety net.
Right.
But, okay, let's just take Jalen Hurts here. Hey, another quarterback. Stafford finally does go. Joe Burrow also went. Okay. Last bench spot, and also we need a kicker and defense, I guess.
At that
I know. Go ahead, Drew.
At that last spot, considering Tannehill's bye week is not going to be for a long time, I probably would have leaned towards more of a Lance or Fields home run type move in that position, honestly. Or maybe just waited till a little later on and then went for that. But I generally stream my quarterback for its bye week. That's just me.
All right. What do we do with this last bench spot? Or do we take a defense or kicker before addressing that?
That's what I was gonna say. It's like there's no one here that I'm like absolutely crazy about, so I would take either like a defense that I feel like I really want, or jump in and get a kicker. Kickers I usually stream a lot more, but getting a top five defense, I mean, it's not a bad thing to have. Um, so it's against the grain a little bit, but it's not like a fifth or sixth round reach kind of thing.
Hmm.
Um, if we're looking at like early schedules for week one, Washington has a pretty nice start. They play the Chargers and then the Giants. The Rams have Chicago, Indy. New England has Miami and the Jets, New Orleans, first 3 weeks. Um, Denver has the Giants, the Jaguars, the Jets. Um, so it just depends on what the preference is there. If you just say, I don't care
Yeah, I
who they're
mean, the
playing, I'll
Rams are
go
the
ahead and
heavy
leave.
favorite here, but
Yeah.
I expect Washington to just pile up sacks this year.
Yeah, I mean, at this point,
But I don't know
defense
about the
isn't something
turnovers.
that I'm so worried
Yeah.
about. I mean, and if you look, it's like a 3 point difference over the course of the season
Mhm.
based on their estimates. So I would just sling one and go so we can keep moving.
I'm inclined to take Washington because of Chase Young. So that's what we did.
Top tier trash talker too. He's been killing it in the preseason.
And look, Justin Tucker's still there. Or we can take our last bench player if there's someone that we're like.
Yeah.
It depends on your league too. If you lose a lot of points for your kickers missing field goals, I try to end up with Tucker a little earlier because he's
All right,
basically
yeah, so we take Justin Tucker, and then we fill it out with pretty much the exact same list that was just here.
What's going on in the tight end land over there? Just in the weird chance that something were to happen to our friend. See, like here, I would take like an Evan Engram.
Yeah, and we've done that a lot. We've talked about that a lot.
Yeah.
Last pick, a guy that was in the top 5 in terms of the position last year at targets. I mean, we'll take a swing at it. C draft grade. Well, you know, in my draft grade in Yahoo in our around the 4-2 fantasy league, I got a C minus. I'm projected to go 3 and 10. So
I also
something
hated
like
this
that,
draft. I would not go with this strategy. I think that the value of getting Kelsey is great, but it just forces your hand in so many other parts of the draft that you get handcuffed a little bit, and you just have to hope that Kelsey is able to continue to perform. Because if he doesn't perform at the tight end one, then your whole team's pretty much a wreck. So I think that's a pretty big drawback to the way of approaching that. And sure, you don't want to wait until the very, very end to get a tight end, but there's a lot better ways to do it. So I can understand why you would take him there, but it's not a strategy that I will be employing.
right. All right, let's just keep this rolling. Because we want to do zero running back, zero receiver type strategies too. As I'm going to go through and do this, Joe, I know that there was like some discussion about what a zero running back draft is, what a zero receiver draft is, even just yesterday when we were planning on doing the show. So if you want to maybe explain what that is, but actually let's make this pick first, and then we can talk about it as we're going through it. So I think at this point we have to, because Davante Adams already went at pick number 4, I say we just let that determine which one we're going to do first and just go with the zero receiver strategy.
Okay.
Because Davante Adams would probably be the receiver we're targeting in a zero running back strategy.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the idea behind like a zero blank strategy. So in this scenario, we're going zero receiver. That means that you're not taking a receiver until about the 6th round of the draft. So if you think about the way that you're constructing your draft strategies, it's pretty much a gradient. So it's an extreme between zero running back, where we're not touching a running back until the 6th round, filling up our starting lineup with other players, moving into then say like a wide receiver heavy scenario where you probably draft your first 2 rounds based on receivers. Then you have like value based drafting in the middle. Then you have like running back heavy where you're drafting probably 2 of your first 3 picks as running back, and then zero receiver where you're not touching the receivers until the 6th round. So ultimately, I think that when you're going through those, it really depends on the rules of the league. I don't personally like to draft in that way. I don't like having a plan before I get there because who knows what's going to happen as you're going through the draft. But I think practicing those different strategies allows you to see, all right, if I am forced to take a pick in this round, like you'll see here, if I'm not doing anything with running backs until the 6th round, or if I'm not doing anything with receivers to the 6th round, what are my picks going to look like in the meantime? And you can start to see where, oh, this feels like a big reach. Oh, this makes me feel uncomfortable. And you just got to trust your gut at that point and trust the research that you've done. But yeah, so 0 receiver, we're going to be looking at populating probably starting 2 running backs, probably have a running back in our flex, and then realistically taking a tight end and a quarterback in those first 5 rounds. And then we'll fill out the receivers at the end.
I think that summarized it pretty well. So again, we aren't going to touch receivers just yet. We could look at a Darren Waller here potentially. Yeah. The top players that is showing us are receivers. Sorry guys, we can't take you. Darren Waller is next here, and I don't know, Joe, if that lines up value wise for you. But it's Darren Waller, or I know we just took Najee, but like Antonio Gibson's there, Joe Mixon, CEH.
Right. So purely from a value perspective, Darren Waller would be at a higher value than CEH, Gibson, Najee, all of those players. My personal preference would be to take Kittle if he's available in that 3rd round spot and sure things up on the 2nd round. Truthfully, I would be picking a receiver here if I took Zeke round 1, but since I can't, I would probably say let's risk it and see if we can snag Kittle on the way back. Just because the drop-off in running backs is going to be steeper than the drop-off between Waller and Kittle.
So for the sake of parity, do we take somebody else besides Najee at this pick, or do we not care about that?
Let's take Gibson, just based off of the expert analysis or whatever. And this is kind of what I was getting at. So if you took Waller with that 3rd or that 2nd pick, then you're seeing that Swift, Carson, those guys that we were really targeting in the 4th round of the last draft, you end up reaching for in the 3rd. So Kittle is probably going to slide into this like middle of the 3rd. I think if you have like a late round 2nd or like you're picking around the turn, I think that's a perfect spot for Waller in terms of like his value. But yeah, I think getting Kittle here is a nice add for sure.
Where did Waller almost made it? CEH and Waller, last 2 picks.
Right.
All right. So yeah, Kittle's going to be the pick here.
And then I would anticipate on the way back, you're either taking one of those top quarterbacks, or you're going to turn around and take like a Chris Carson or DeAndre Swift, something like that. Mm-hmm. So
and what's the preference there?
I've said that I'm not really big on Swift. I would have no problem taking Carson. We took him in the 4th round of the last draft. What quarterbacks are available right now?
Josh Allen.
It's only not Mahomes. Like Mahomes is the only one taken, I believe. So
okay. Technically, Allen grades out better than, from a value perspective, than like these running backs. So I wouldn't hate the Josh Allen pick, especially since we're not allowed to draft receivers yet. And I think just knowing the value of players that we have in the 5th and 6th rounds for running backs, so still knowing that you're going to have Josh Jacobs, Darrell Henderson, and those guys will be playing in a flex role. It's like, all right, let's go get somebody that could be QB1 and have it done.
Yeah. And it's different than what we've done. So just to give you guys another, point of view or perspective, I think that this should be the route that we go and see what – okay, so now is it – and I know that we talked about this too. It's different rounds, right? Isn't it like round 4 if you're doing a 0 running back, or like round 6 if you're doing 0 receiver?
It's going to be – so if you're going to be running back heavy – then that's like the first 3 rounds. Or if you're going to be wide receiver heavy, that's the first 3 rounds.
Okay.
If you're going to go 0 something, then you're not making a pick for that position until round 6 would be the first opportunity to make that. So technically we would still be drafting realistically a running back here.
Chris Carson.
The guys that we still were looking at are still available.
Yeah. Chris Carson's still there. I know he's got the same buy as Antonio Gibson, but
I mean,
we can figure it out between our bench.
Right. So I think they're pretty comparable as far as like value. It's like a 4.3 versus a 4.0 above replacement. So it's really a matter of preference. Swift and Carson.
Okay.
So to me, it's pick either one. It's a matter of preference. We already picked Carson in the last draft, so you can pick Swift just to do something different. But very similar players here.
Okay. Juju wide receiver 1.
Yeah, pretty much. Unless you think that Kenny Galladay is going to do better with the Giants. To me, they're like pretty equal.
I don't know. I think the upside is higher, but I think Juju's much safer. And we haven't drafted a receiver yet. So which one? That kind of goes back to like Drew's point where he wants to have his starters, and then with his bench, he's looking for those guys that can be, a diamond in the rough.
Right.
So for me, I'm probably leaning Juju here.
Okay, let's do it.
Also, we haven't drafted a Steeler on this team yet. So Jerry Jeudy.
It's time.
He's right there.
Who's meant to be.
Not even having a discussion about it.
Love that. And then Robbie Anderson's still there. That's wild. Same with Boyd. I would have graded them higher, but Judy's climbing up the board. So
what's between these two? Because this isn't really a discussion that we've had between Robbie Anderson and Tyler Boyd.
I mean, Robbie Anderson was a wide receiver 1 last year with Teddy Two Gloves. Boyd has added more competition to his game. And as Drew said earlier, Robbie Anderson just got paid, and you follow the money.
Follow the money.
I think
that's going to be the motto of the show.
Yeah.
Robbie Anderson's the pick.
And so where are we at in terms of running backs that are available now? Okay. Because then it becomes how far do you go before you pivot back to get some more depth on the running back side?
Probably this pick.
Yeah. And that's where it becomes challenging when you pretty much box yourself out.
Mm-hmm.
You end up having to overcompensate later, and you miss out on the running back flyers because realistically, between Gibson, Elliott, and Swift, they should never be leaving your lineup, assuming that they do what they get paid to do.
Yeah. I'm probably taking another running back in this spot.
Okay.
I'd be looking at upside, and I think that Ronald Jones has the biggest upside there, or Connor.
Yeah, but you can get Connor for a lot later, I feel.
Yeah. So maybe we can even wait on the running back again.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to take a running back here, I'd probably go Mostert, just because he is the starter for a high-power offense. Yes, there's injury risk there, but if he manages to stay healthy, then he's always put up numbers.
So it's Mostert, or we take a wide receiver and get a running back next round?
Corey Davis was the guy I liked the best there.
All right, let's do it. And Tannehill just went in the 9th there. I don't know if y'all saw that.
Mostert just went. But Ronald Jones is still there.
Yeah, so I would say you probably realistically want one more running back, and then you would be – or you're just going to go and get Tony Pollard.
Well, I think we pulled it at the right time because as soon as we took Rojo, 3 running backs were right after us as well. Yeah. So this was in the string of a run on running backs there. Okay, now it's at that point again where like I guess we got 4 wide receivers, 4 running backs. Kind of up in the air what we could do. I feel like it's just best value at this point.
I would be taking Pollard.
Is this where you handcuff? Yeah.
Yeah.
Cuff.
Yeah. I'm on board with that. Oh, boy. Oh, boy.
Buddy. It's your buddy. You already know what's about to happen.
You take him. I'm logging off.
Just click the button.
I'm logging off.
If I was gonna say Logan Thomas just got drafted, I would say pairing Logan Thomas there would have been pretty nice too. We can still take that Evan Ingram like last bench spot kind of thing.
So that's either here or we take our kicker and defense. We got 1 bench spot as well. So
knowing that Evan Ingram is pretty much going for free and that you have Kittle, I wouldn't mind waiting, because if you don't get them, it's not the end of the world. So get better players for what you're actually going to be using. And then
all right, well, we're taking
lottery
Pittsburgh's
pick.
defense.
Shocker. Biggest plot twist of the night.
When I get one of the big 3 or 4 at tight end, I just punt it the rest of the way. I'll stream it the week of their bye.
Would you rather take a long shot at a quarterback here then?
Well,
Guess not.
I thought we were just on board with that last pick was going to be Evan
No,
Ingram.
we're cool with it. I mean, at the end of the day, if you don't like the Evan Ingram pick, then you can drop him and get that quarterback still anyway.
Right.
So that's fun.
So this grades out better than our first team. So we're improving.
Yeah. And I think that there's a lot of value there in the first couple picks of the draft. They're going to be pretty standard. It's really that like 3 through 6. That's really where the money's going to be made. So I think limiting yourself, you can see where we were starting to reach a little bit and how the consequences of your starting receivers in a full PPR league are Juju and Jerry Jeudy, which could have great seasons, but also could completely fall on their face. So I think having a little bit more balance would do a lot for the lineup. But having Elliott, Gibson, and Swift, who are all pass-catching backs, there's upside there as well. So definitely pros and cons to the approach.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that we didn't take a so what round was it? Round 6 where we eventually pulled the trigger?
Yeah.
Given that we waited so long, I don't completely hate how it panned out. It's definitely better than I think the first approach that we took.
Right.
But again, this isn't something that I don't think any of the 3 of us would do.
No, for sure. And I think depending on the rules that you play in, if you're in a standard league, I think it makes a lot more sense to be running back bias, because there's guarantees there with the volume that they're getting. And if you can lock in more volume plays, then you're going to have a higher floor in standard. With PPR, it's a lot different because there's so many other factors that can go in with the pick. So yeah, I just think that
let's pretend that didn't happen. We're just going to refresh this page and start over.
Did Adams go number 5?
We need Adams to not go in the top 5 here. There we go. Okay, he's there. So if we're going with a wide receiver heavy approach now, Davante Adams is going to be the pick for us in this middle of the first round.
Right.
And look at this. Look how it's coming back too. If you, for some reason, wanted to really go with this approach, this is probably the ideal scenario for you. The only other receiver that just came off the board was Tyreek Hill. So you still have 2 of those big. How many wide receivers do you consider to be in that top tier? You obviously have Davante Adams. You have Tyreek Hill. Is Calvin Ridley in that tier yet with Stephon Diggs and with DeAndre Hopkins as well?
So the tiers this year have shaken out as Adams, Hill, and Diggs is tier 1.
Okay.
Hopkins, Ridley, Jefferson, Metcalf, tier 2. And then it opens up a lot into tier 3 with A.J. Brown, Keenan Allen, Allen Robinson, Terry McLaurin.
Is that how you guys view it as well? Or that's what I'm asking.
I think that Calvin Ridley could finish the year as wide receiver 1.
Okay.
It's very possible. If I am drafting early and I'm getting a top 3 pick, Calvin Ridley is somebody that I'm looking at a lot. Do I have the cojones to draft him over Diggs or Hopkins? No. I would probably be taking Diggs here.
Same.
I don't
He's
think
vaccinated.
He's vaccinated.
So.
It's too early to take the Waller pick in my mind. I'd rather, again, wait for the Kittle slide.
Yeah.
But
I'm on board with Diggs as well. And then I know that Waller, you mentioned him, is on the board too. I think the ideal scenario is Kittle gets back to us. So I like that Waller hasn't been taken yet, because you got to imagine he's going to be taken before we see Kittle come off the board. Right. So hopefully we get a little bit of a run here on these receivers after we take one, and then
it wouldn't be a bad scenario if we end up with a guy with Hawkinson though, just to see how it goes. Because there goes Kittle and Waller. Yeah. I just had a feeling. I'm not gonna lie.
Kittle did go before Waller though. Waller almost got back to literally 1 pick.
All right, so we're still not allowed to draft.
No.
Okay. So I can't take a quarterback in the 3rd round. It's just against my
We're going back to receiver. Honestly, what's there? I
mean, Keenan Allen
in the flex.
Yeah. I don't hate Keenan Allen as a third-round pick. I think this is getting a bit ridiculous as far as the draft strategy. But, I mean, PPR, you have like 450 targets amongst your receivers, and you can pretty much punt on receivers for the rest of the draft. Like, bearing injury, there's no
So,
that.
yeah, and I don't think the value's not there at tight end right now.
No.
We literally just saw where Hawkinson fell to.
Right.
And then in the draft right after that, he went in the 5th round.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, that first draft, it was like everybody had their pieces of paper and they didn't realize that Hawkinson wasn't drafted yet, and then somebody finally figured it out. So I guess we're back to taking Allen if we're still not allowed to take. Or do you want to say we're just going to do wide receiver heavy and now you start considering
wide receiver heavy? Yeah, I think that here we could take a running back.
Right, you could. And I think it makes sense if you're gonna like having. I don't know. I would probably be taking Carson here if I had those 3 receivers. I actually don't hate this team at all. Or if you really felt strongly about the quarterback situation, Josh Allen, obviously there. I don't hate it. It's a little bit rich for my blood, but I would rather draft him and see if he fell to like the 5th or the 6th. Don't think it would happen, but you could see it there. So
yeah, I would almost do something I wouldn't typically do and definitely take a running back here, but say like one of these other 2 guys like Lamar or Kyler where they're coming back. Yeah. Maybe not draft the second running back yet, but go with the quarterback earlier than normal still.
Yeah, I think you got to look at the tight end in that spot too. So,
yeah. So let's take Carson and see what it looks like. Julio Swift, Allen goes. But that's it.
So now it becomes: do you take Kyler or do you risk it with Hawkinson?
How big of a difference do you have Hawkinson, Pitts, and Andrews?
Not that big. I would say that's like that middle tier of the it's like you have the top 3, which are like studs. You have the middle 3, which are like potential studs in the future or break out this year. Andrews is pretty much a known commodity at this point. They just don't have the passing volume for him to really take that next step. But definitely serviceable. He's like pre-wasteland, and then everything else is just like, well, your guess is as good as mine kind of thing. I don't hate the Kyler Murray pick. I also don't hate the James Robinson pick here. Obviously, you don't need receivers. So the way that I see this, though, is that I would probably take Murray, and here's why. If you look at the running backs that are going to be coming up, you've got, I believe Miles Sanders hasn't been drafted yet. So you have him, Josh Jacobs, Darrell Henderson, Mike Davis, Myles Gaskin, Kareem Hunt. You have a lot of players that will be serviceable running back 2s. Kyler Murray still falls within that top 4, could be quarterback 1 at the end of the year. Or if you feel that Lamar Jackson is going to do better than him, then you could take him too. So to me, it's like, what is your preference between those 2 guys? Because the drop off in quarterback is going to be a lot steeper after the first 4. The difference between, say, if we were to take Robinson versus Henderson, to me, that's nominal.
I think there's those running backs in there.
Okay, so it looks like Hawk is still there.
Yeah. Tight ends below him went.
What did they got against TJ Hawkinson? Huh?
I don't know, but I would be taking him here.
Yeah, no running back went right there. So everything that you said about the running backs available is still going to hold true on the next pick.
Right.
Robinson went. Sanders went. But everybody else is still there.
But I'm totally fine with a Darrell Henderson, Josh Jacobs.
There was a little run on quarterback there, which helped us get those here.
Well, I think once those first 4 go, people start to panic a little bit and oh, well, now I got to get my guy before there's nothing left. But really, up until you get to Matt Ryan, that's 13, 14 serviceable QBs. In a 1 QB league, he'll be fine.
Mm-hmm. All right, so I'm probably Team Henderson on this pick, slightly over Jacobs.
Which is crazy because last year Josh Jacobs was like the second round pick.
Yeah, hey, and he's in the NFL top 100. So
Yeah,
We
I
know how
think that
much-
Henderson has a better offense. I think Jacobs is a better player, but Henderson's situation's better.
okay, so we did see some running backs go there. After we took Henderson, we see Jacobs, Gaskin, and Davis go.
I think I would look at the potential of a home run player here with Javonte Williams, because I still think we can get a safer running back that can be the first guy off the bench a little later on.
Okay. Let me see what the running backs are looking like. What do you think about – I don't know that I would do this, but I'm not saying that people will, but just presenting the question to you guys. How would you feel about taking Javonte Williams and Melvin Gordon to start the season, like if you were drafting right now and just seeing how it played out?
I think they're in a legitimate timeshare, so I wouldn't do that. I think that they are going to be splitting carries. I just think that Javonte Williams has a better chance to just look much better than Melvin Gordon and just run with it. And Melvin Gordon has injury concerns. I think that they're going to be a 50-50 split.
Yeah, to me, you could hold both as lottery tickets, but I think it just wastes bench space because then you're hoping one of your players gets hurt, essentially, so that the other one becomes useful. So I probably wouldn't employ that, but
the pick here is either you can go safe.
You can slightly see the reasoning behind doing something like that, though.
Yeah, absolutely. Because then regardless of how the situation plays out, if one takes over, then you are set.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's pretty much the idea there. You're pretty much
But the worst case scenario is that it stays in what it's going to start the season as.
Right.
All right. So you mentioned Javonte Williams. I mean, Joe, where are you with this pick?
I mean, I would probably take Hunt just because we know that he has that like running back 2 caliber, and we don't have any running backs on the bench right now. I don't see Javonte Williams going to the next pick, but I would probably take Kareem Hunt there just to lock it down and say, all right, like if Carson, who is injury prone, Henderson, who already has the thumb issue, if they aren't able to play, Kareem Hunt, he gets the goal line touches, he'll be serviceable, and if in some instance that Nick Chubb does get hurt, then you have a top 5 running back. So to me, like Kareem Hunt is like a perfect storm of like first guy off the bench, like fantasy player.
Yeah, he's the safer play, but I feel like there's the possibility that Chase Edmonds lasts one more round, and if not, I'm comfortable with James Conner or a guy like that being my first player off the bench.
Yeah, I mean, Connor will definitely be there. I have no doubt in my mind. Edmonds, maybe. Javonte Williams will not be there the next pick, though. So if you feel strongly about it, fantasy football is supposed to be something like you have an interest in your team. If you really feel some type of way about him, you think he's the guy, go.
Hey, I don't know. He's got the same bye week though as Henderson.
Who does?
Javonte.
A lot of stuff can happen in 11 weeks.
True.
All right. We'll take him because Ryan Platt will be happy about the pick as well. Chase Edmonds is there.
There's a lot of concern around how much of a load Chase Edmonds can take, and he's starting to see his ADP drop for that reason.
Well, he didn't do well whenever Kenyon Drake left or got hurt or whatever it was last year. Like they thought he was going to step up and be like, he's taking over, he's the bell cow, and it just did not pan out that way for him at all.
Ryan's actually in here. He just said Javonte Williams RB1. All right. Well, yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with that. I just feel like we know what he is as a pass catcher, though, and in a PPR league, and we already drafted one running back who we really don't know what he is. Like, if we're not taking him, who's to be the 4th running back?
James Conner. I just think that James Conner, for his value, is a better pick than Chase Edmonds, personally. If I had to choose one of them, Connor's the guy I'm taking.
See, I would go the other way because Chase Edmonds had value before, like when he was with Drake. So it's like Connor has to get the role. He's on a 1 year, $3 million contract.
He's on a prove-it deal.
Right. So I think at least the way that the team's constructed, you really only need 2 guys to be functional at a given time. You've already got the lottery pick. I think Chase Edmonds does have some.
I'd be taking Edmonds here on my team.
I'm fine with that. I think in most leagues that I'm drafting, I'd rather take the value between the two.
Yeah. And then I think here's where I'd go into like Corey Davis just to get like a backup like for my receivers.
You're actually getting an argument here from me. Corey Davis. Hey, James Conner is still there. Okay, so 4 running backs. We got 4 receivers, and 3 of those are absolute studs that aren't coming out of the lineup other than their bye weeks. So
with the tight ends there, just Fant.
Logan Thomas on the same bye as Hawkinson.
Yeah, I paired them in so many mock drafts, not realizing that they're both bye. So frustrating.
I really have no idea what we should do here.
I mean, it's really you could take like a Marvin Jones if you wanted. I think to me at this point, it's like you have your lineup pretty much locked down. So
yeah,
Mooney with
he's a guy we've talked about. We're taking Darnell Mooney.
What I was going to say is I would probably be going in this construction of the lineup. I would probably be going for more home runs on the running backs, just because if everybody is playing better than Diggs, Adams, and Allen, like your team's garbage anyway. So it's like, what are some like deeper running back picks that could?
Philip Lindsay.
Philip Lindsay, I think, is a guy that you could take a flyer on, absolutely. Or you start taking other people's handcuffs.
Well, I feel like we have to take Philip Lindsay in a draft because
I like it.
I don't know if it necessarily has to be here because based off ADP he last, but I don't know who else we're taking at this pick.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, it's going to be overdrafted regardless. I mean, I don't really worry about ADP here. I think it's about like where do you see the upside because these guys really aren't going to be starters. I know for my team, I think by the end of the season, I'll probably have 5 players left that I drafted. So I'm not concerned with them saying, oh, well, this pick was here, there, or the other because it doesn't matter as soon as the draft's over.
We need one more bench spot, kicker and defense, and then that's it.
Okay. I would say once again, Hawkinson is supposed to be, it's a lot of hype. So it's like getting another tight end to kind of like throw into that mix. You know who I'm going to say. But
who's your homer tight end?
What's that?
Who's the guy in this range tight end that you think is a home run type move? I
would say
Buzz too.
Potential home runs. Let's see. I would say Hunter Henry, Evan Ingram. Who was I talking about earlier for the Saints? That's not Troutman.
Juwan Johnson.
Yeah, Juwan Johnson if he's listed as a tight end in your league, and that's like deep. Like, don't draft him. Like, you can get him for free.
Pat Fryer,
Komet.
Dan Arnold.
But yeah, so.
All right. Well, for this, I don't want to take Evan Ingram yet again. So,
I mean, you can take another name. Smith with the Hunter Henry injury. I mean, that could play.
Great pick. Love it.
Thank you.
Defense and kicker. Justin Tucker's there again.
Excellent.
Bam.
You're probably streaming
Raven
at this point.
Well, if there's the defense that I would be looking at here is Denver. Their first 3 weeks are just like amazing. But Patriots are returning a lot more starters than they had last year.
Was this the exact same 86? Is that the same as the second one?
It was the same. And I think that's happening because you are really good. If you look at the if you scroll up to the top, maybe not. They have a thing on here where it'll tell you like, here's how you break out for the standings. Here's some things you could have did different. And I'm sure it's going to say, all right, you have the best wide receiver group in your league. There's no debating that, but your Maybe this will show it right here, actually. Yeah. So it's like if you look at your receivers, you're number one for sure. But otherwise, like it's not going to be good. So what you can see here, if you're in the projected standings, this team's
position ranks.
projected to be fourth, but you're going to have the third best starters. Your bench is a little bit suspect, but we know that because we're taking more home run picks. We're not just taking the highest bench score. But
that
if
kicker
you
though.
Kicker's number one, but if you scroll down on the right-hand side, it's going to give you some feedback based on what's going on. And this is why I like the Fantasy Pros, because it gives you that feedback. It makes you think about it. So 4 top 3 players. They said something about drafting Dallas Goedert. You would have more points in your bench. Who cares? Week 7, we've talked about the treacherous of that bye week, and then we also had a stack in our lineup too. So there's just a lot of different things that they have. But
look at this.
Boom. But
You
yeah,
can't find this anywhere else than Drew Hannes on the Around the 4-2 Fantasy Football Show. You would have had it last week.
They were sleeping on him.
But yeah, I mean, these draft grades don't mean everything. I mean, even if you look at like NFL drafts, I mean, people get tough grades all the time on different things. So I think it's really filling out your team and not reaching on players. I think that's when people get into trouble. If you say like, all right, well, I have to take a running back here in the 3rd round, and there's no good running backs, and you're passing on Keenan Allen to take, say, like a DeAndre Swift or maybe someone who's in that lower tier, that's where people are going to run into problems. Or if you're saying, oh, well, I need to take Najee Harris first overall. Like, sure, you can, but there's going to be ramifications for that. And we saw that with the Kelsey pick. We saw that when you box yourself into a particular strategy. So I think the best advice is just to be fluid, take your time, and just like think about like as you're doing your practice stuff, all right, if I take this here, what's that impact going to be? Because it allows you to see a lot of different scenarios.
This is kind of draft season, right? I mean, by the time that we record our next show, I feel like a lot of people that watch or listen to this show will have drafted. So
draft weekend of the year.
Yeah, I did one already this past Thursday. I have another one Saturday, and then I have my final one Thursday the 2nd, 1 week before the NFL season kicks off. So, yeah, that time is coming. We will have another show kind of right in the middle, I guess, of the biggest draft season period. Next Tuesday, episode 3 of season 3 of the Around the 4-1-2 Fantasy Football Show. Do you guys have any other closing thoughts, maybe pieces of advice? I know, Joe, that you just offered up some great advice to just be fluid. Don't box yourself into a particular strategy, as we just showed you 3 right there that none of us would really employ in an actual draft. But just to show you guys how things break down, we did them. But any other closing pieces of advice from either of you?
I mean, you're going to go into a draft loving a player. Try your best to be smart about it. Hope that maybe get some value. You can always trade for that guy.
Yeah, I know Drew loves a lot of guys that are going to go in like the top 4 rounds. So he doesn't have my affection for Darnell Mooney. His is like Najee Harris
I like him, but I love CeeDee Lamb this year. Like I want him bad in every league. I want CeeDee Lamb, and there's someone watching right now that I'm going to keep pestering him about it. Eventually, I'm going to get him. And Zena.
Yeah. Only advice I have is try not to draft in multiple leagues at the same time. I had 2 auction drafts going at once last year, and it was not fun. So if you can get your draft scheduled different days or different times, it's very helpful. So good luck, best of drafting, and just trust your gut. That's all you can really do at this point. Trust the research, trust the money, trust your gut.
Follow the money as well.
Always follow the money. Get that bread. Secure the bag alert.
Well, we appreciate everybody that has tuned in to this episode of the Around the 4-2 Fantasy Football Show. If you stuck around this entire time, we can't thank you enough. Like I always say, please hit that subscribe button if you are not already subscribed. I know 60% of people that watch our live streams or clips from the show are not currently subscribed. So change that, subscribe to the channel, leave us a like, leave us a comment for what you want to see in the coming weeks. Best of luck to you in your fantasy football drafts. You can always tweet at us at AT412FF Show on Twitter. That link will be in the description of the show, along with our personal Twitter accounts. You can tweet at us anytime and asked us questions. Drew's up the earliest out of us, so he'll answer them if you decide to tweet at us at like 5 a.m. But other than that, thanks for tuning into this show. We will see you guys next week. Bye-bye.
Later.